Why Communism? Plain Talks on Vital Problems. Chapter 5, A Program of Action. Section 1, Economic Struggle. How can it be done? Once you agree that the state is your enemy, the answer to the question is not difficult. Once you have freed yourself from the democracy illusion, your road is clear. Watch the state. Try to understand every one of its maneuvers. The state is often used by capitalists not only as a big stick, but also as a poison gas or as an anesthetic, as in the case under the New Deal. Quite often you are told that you are given privileges at the same time that your pockets are being picked. Analyze the functions of the state. Try to understand the forces behind its actions, and remember that if it ever yields anything to the workers, it does so under pressure. This leads us to the road along which the working class can arrive at the destruction of the capitalist state. Revolutionary struggle. The working class is placed in capitalist society in a position where it must live, it must fight. To be effective, must be aimed not only at the capitalists, but also at the state. And once the fight is effective enough, it must inevitably lead to smashing up of the state. This is the logic of the class division of today. And this indicates the program of action for the working class for today and tomorrow and day after tomorrow until the final reckoning with the capitalist system has arrived. The fight begins in the factory, mine, and mill. It is first of all a fight for higher wages, for shorter labor hours, for better working conditions. It is a fight for unemployment insurance, for social insurance generally, but which is understood that the state pays a minimum wage out to those out of work, to the sick, to the injured, and the aged. Capitalists love to indulge in humanitarian phrases. History has proved, however, that they never grant anything to the working class unless they are forced to do so by the fight of the workers. This is why the very existence of the working class is under the sign fight. Every fight, however, demands its own organization. The working class has long created agencies for the economic struggles, the labor unions and the unemployed councils, the former to fight for the better conditions of those employed, the latter to fight for those who are unemployed. We call these struggles economic because their main purpose is to secure for the workers a larger share of the products created by their own labor. They challenge the economic power of the ruling class. Not much acumen is needed to realize the economic struggles cannot remain purely economic. When you strike, when you form a picket line, the state is in the shape of the policeman and armed thugs rushes to the aid of the employers. When you demonstrate for social insurance, you are again confronted with the armed forces of which is busy dispersing the crowd. We are now living under the Blue Eagle. The National Industrial Recovery Act promised the workers pie in the sky. But under this new dispensation, one injunction after the other issued against the strikers. The very aim of the NRA is to crush the resistance of the workers. It is therefore inevitable that whenever the workers are bent on actually defending their economic demands, they are forced to fight the state. We communists hold that every class struggle is a political struggle. When you demand insurance, you address both to the capitalists and to the state. When you demonstrate for home relief, you present your demands to the city or state government, which is a political body. When you fight for the 8-hour workday or the abolition of child labor by law, you are defending an economic demand by directing your struggle against the state. When you fight for higher wages When your fight for higher wages to be gotten from the owners of a plant or mill, you always confront the agencies of the state, not only as policemen, but also as the injunction judges, as mediators, arbitrators, and other kinds of official peacemakers who have the interests of the employers at the heart. This is why we say that every class struggle is a political struggle. The communists and the reformists. And it is here that we communists come into the sharpest clash with the leaders of the American Federation of Labor and similar organizations, including socialist unions, all of which we term reformist. It is a foundation stone of the policy of such labor leaders to cooperate with the state. These leaders claim to defend the interests of the workers, but they also claim that they have no quarrel with the system. They must admit that they have labor disputes with some unfair employers. The state to them is always fair. The majority of capitalists, they believe, is also fair. The minority of recalcitrant employers, they say, must either be cajoled or persuaded, or else frightened by the public opinion to fall in line. Once this is accomplished, they contend, nothing remains for the workers but to cooperate with their employers and the government for the common benefit of all. Again, we have before us a rosy picture. And again, we must remain realists. We must see those leaders in action. We must unmask them before the workers. At first, however, we call your attention to the very outlook of those leaders, to what is called scientific language their ideology. They proceed from the conception of unity of interest between employer and employee. By this alone, they deceive the workers. There is no more unity between employer and employee than there is between the robber and the robbed. There's a clash of interests. There's an eternal antagonism. There can be no peace and no unity between the exploiter and his victims. The capitalist strives to secure for himself as much of the worker's product as he can get by force or fraud or both. The workers, resisting exploitation, strive to get as big of a share of their own product as they can force the boss to yield. This is fundamental. This is the law of capitalist society. It is a division of classes. It is a never-ending class conflict as long as capitalism lasts. This conflict may not always break out in violent actions, like demonstrations and strikes, but always smolders underneath. Capitalist society is a battleground, and the workers are an army on the march against the enemy. He who says, then, that there is a unity of interest between employers and employees is committing treason to the working class. Needless to say, the state is not neutral. At best, the state only pretends to be a friend of the workers. Under the NRA, you are told you have equal rights with your employer, and the state is in partnership with both. With this guarantee, is worth could be seen in the fact when 60,000 miners in the bituminous coal fields went on strike in defense of their fundamental rights, the government, in league with the leaders of the AFL, did their damnedest to crush the strike. The truth of this statement is revealed in the shooting and killing of pickets in Philadelphia, in the calling out of the militia with artillery and machine guns against the striking miners in New Mexico and Utah, and the injunctions against peaceful picketing of bakery workers, furniture workers, and shoe workers in New York City. When a labor leader of the reformist type tries to persuade the workers that the state is equally fair to employer and employee, he's hiding behind blinding the workers and undermining their resistance. This is exactly what those labor leaders have been doing for many years. They've been preventing workers from realizing their own strength. They have been putting every obstacle in the way of their fighting to secure a better living. They have practically discarded the strike, the instrument of power by which the workers can force concessions from their exploiters. They call the strike an expensive and barbaric method of struggle. They are as much concerned about the well-being of employers as that they are afraid of some damage to their profits as the result of a successful strike. They have discouraged many a strike which broke out spontaneously because the workers could stand their conditions no longer. Wherever these leaders call a strike, they are forced to do so by militant spirit of the rank and file. The strike is a sham, a subterfuge, a maneuver to avoid a real struggle. Instead of broadening the strike, calling out the neighboring industrial establishments and spreading the struggle over a wide area, instead of firing the strikers with confidence, with enthusiasm, with consciousness of their strength, the leaders smother the movement by underhand machinations with the bosses. The leaders are happy when they secure something like an arbitration to settle the dispute. And what is that board of arbitration which is to decide over the destinies of the workers? As often as not composed of equal number of representatives from the workers and the employer. Those who represent the employer know very well how to defend his capitalist interests. The reformist leaders who represent the workers do not defend their interests because they do not believe there is a fundamental clash between capitalism and the working class. They are submissive. They are servile. The two parties agree on impartial chairman, who's to decide between them. The impartial chairman is either a lawyer or a capitalist politician. Under the NRA, the arbitrator is often a Blue Eagle state agent, which is often worse than an impartial chairman. The fate of the workers is left in the hands of people who belong to the enemy class. Nor is this all. The reformist leaders are guilty of having broken innumerable strikes. They are guilty of having imported strikebreakers to break the resistance of what they choose to call outlaw strikes, which in reality were strikes in defiance of the cringing policies of the reformists. They are guilty of having called the sheriffs and the militia forced dissatisfied strikers into submission, which means to force them to work for a hunger wage. They are guilty of trying to crush every working class protest arising against their policies within their own organizations. Nor is that all. Under the NRA, the reformist leaders have been incorporated into their mission as members of innumerable advisory boards. They work hand in glove with the greatest labor baiters, open shop bosses, and such individuals as the former chief of police of New York City, the notorious forger of anti-Soviet documents and killer of working class demonstrators, Grover Whalen. They rush to every place where the workers, dissatisfied with their starvation wages, demand a living wage. Like real estate agents, they threaten and use force. Like betrayers from within, they deceive and split the workers' ranks. You will not be surprised when the reformist traitors of the working class, they are that. And there are no fundamental difference in this respect between reformists belonging to the Republican or Democratic parties and the reformists belonging to the socialist parties. William Green or John Lewis, Matthew Wall or David Dubinsky, Edward McGrady, now raised to the post of Assistant Secretary of Labor for his good services to the bosses, or Sidney Hillman, no matter how different their coloring may be, they are all birds of a feather. They claim to be pure and simple unionists. Their slogan is "No politics in the labor movement." What a lie! They themselves are steeped in politics. They are mixed up with the state. They are part and parcel of the machinery of the state. They are not free of the politics. They are only engaged in rotten politics, in capitalist politics. And politics tend to deliver the workers bound hand to foot to their masters. But, you may ask, why labor unions? Isn't the Communist Party a political party? If so, what does this have to do with labor unions? What is revolutionary unionism? We communists are in favor of labor unions because every kind of struggle requires its own organization. Moreover, we communists are the only political party that takes labor unions seriously. To us, the struggle for higher wages, shorter work hours, better conditions, unemployment insurance is fundamental struggle of the working class. We say struggle has to be conducted with unity and strength. We say the workers who are unorganized must organize into strong industrial unions based on shop committees and mine committees elected by the workers themselves and must have a leadership rooted in the masses. These unions must educate the workers and understand their class interests. They must teach them lessons of unity, and concerted action must lead them to strikes in the other class battles against their bosses. We say that the workers organized in the reformist unions must form a revolutionary opposition which will head the struggles of the workers against the will of the leaders. The more workers fight, the more their strength grows. The stronger they become, the more successful is their fight. We communists give our full and unqualified cooperation to the revolutionary unions that are affiliated with the Trade Union Unity League because they are the only real unions in this country. They adhere to the principle of industrial unionism, which means that all the workers of the same industry are in one union, as against the principle of the narrow craft unionism pursued by reformist unions. They adhere to the principle of class struggle as against the principle of peace pursued by the reformist union leaderships. And they are rank-and-file unions where the workers themselves manage and lead in close cooperation with committees freely elected from their midst. At the same time, we communists give our support and endorsement to the revolutionary opposition within the reformist unions. We try to lead the workers in every one of their economic struggles, and we try to develop a mass struggle of all the workers, no matter what their party or organizational affiliation. If confronted with an injunction, we say, smash injunctions by mass violation. If confronted with hired thugs attempting to break the picket line, we say, don't yield, offer resistance. If the police are sent by exploiters to crush our fight, stand solid and put up a mass front. This may not be in accordance with the law, boss law, but is in accordance with your own sacred class interests. We've mentioned social insurance. We want to say a few more words about it. There are about 17 million unemployed at present time. They must live. This vicious system has excluded them from productive work, but all goods accumulated in this country are the fruit of their labor. They are entitled to all the wealth. They insist on their right to live. The working class cannot allow its members to perish because the exploiters have created a system that cannot work anymore. The capitalists are determined to grant no social insurance, which includes unemployment insurance. In 1932, Roosevelt, in his campaign speeches, promised unemployment insurance. He has long forgotten his pledge. He is never meant to be redeemed. The leaders of the AFL and their posing unemployment insurance as a dole finally came out in favor of it in words. In action, however, they try to break every struggle of the workers for social insurance. The communists alone have led numerous fights for unemployment insurance in the form of demonstrations, hunger marches, delegations to the home relief bureaus. The communists were instrumental in organizing the unemployment councils, which, working hand in hand with revolutionary unions, are fighting for unemployment insurance and immediate relief. It may be said with full assurance that whatever aid has been obtained by the unemployed is due to the militancy of the workers under the communist leadership. While these struggles are fundamental, there are a number of other struggles which are no less important and which in their entirety form the class struggle of workers against the capitalist system.